Dark bleatings, everybody! Welcome back to another Happy Goat horror video. We've ranked all the Stephen King books. Last week I talked about my favourite apocalyptic fiction, and now we're ranking something again. We're ranking every Adam Nevill novel. I did think about ranking every Adam Nevill book, including the short stories, but it was too hard, to be honest with you. I really love his short story collections, and I think I'd like to rank every Adam Nevill short story and do that in a separate video using those books. So we're just going with novels today. It's a nice round number. He has 10 novels up to date. I have read everything that he's published so far, I believe. If I have somehow managed to miss a book, let me know, but I don't think so, because I'm quite obsessed. We're going to go in reverse order from my least favourite to my most favourite. And I should tell you ahead of time that I didn't dislike any of these books. So the fact that something is ranked near the bottom for me isn't as any sort of indication that the book isn't great. It's just, you know, my personal preference for the order I put them in. So at number 10, we have Lost Girl. So this is set a few decades in the future and the world has gone to shit. Climate change is a massive factor. There's, you know, people are starving, there's a lot of crime and all sorts of craziness, crazy horrible stuff. And we follow a father who whose daughter was kidnapped near the start of the book, and he's on a mission to find out what happened to her, or to find her, or whatever he can do. He cannot rest with this just hanging in the air. This is a great read. I would say that this is the least horror-y of Adam Nevill's horror novels. It's quite horrific. There are loads of elements here that are very scary. I kind of leaned into thinking this was more of a thriller, and that's why it's at the bottom of the list. My reading preferences lean way more towards supernatural horror, and I especially love Neville's supernatural horror, and I think because I'd read a number of his books before I got to this one, I was expecting his usual storytelling, well, not storytelling style, but his usual sort of subject matter, which this doesn't really fall into so much. So I think that that's why this is the bottom of the list for me, but it's a really good book, and a lot of people love this one. So that's number 10. At number 9, we have The Reddening, and I have to just say very quickly, look at this cover. I really love this cover artist that does these works, Sam Araya. I say it wrong every time. I'm so sorry, Sam, if you see this. So we're following two characters called Helene and Helene and Katrine, and they're both looking for people in this sort of seasidey town, and there are things at work in this town, mysterious things, and it's quite horrible. There's some really horrible, terrible things going on in this town, and yeah, the more these two characters are looking for answers, I guess, the more they're probably regretting finding the answers that are coming up. This has such a great opening. Even though this is number 9 on my list, the opening of this story is so scary, and the image that has been painted for me in red has just seared into my brain. And it's one of those things where, you know, when you're in bed late at night and you're trying to fall asleep and your brain's ticking over and you're thinking, just think of something nice and peaceful, and then something scary pops in. It's always what I pictured when I was reading the opening of this book, and then I'm like, well, I'm awake now, gonna have to get up and read something scary to wash away the other scary thing that was in my brain. So that's number 9. It's a great read. There's a history in this town that's being uncovered, and oh my word, I'm glad I don't live there, I'll just say that. Number 8 is Under a Watchful Eye. This is about a guy called Seb who's essentially being stalked by someone or something, and he's getting increasingly worried about it, and he should be worried about it. Parched, I tell you, parched. This is one of the first Nevill books I read, and even though for whatever reason my brain is a little bit foggy on the actual story and what actually happens in it, I do remember feeling very scared, and I do remember that I read this in one sitting, and I know that I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads, so I'm going to go back to this one. I'm quite excited to revisit because it's very unlike me to forget like all of the details of a book I absolutely love. So yeah, it's hanging around in the back of my brain. I just remember being quite scared for Seb for the whole book, and I can't wait to get back into it. So yeah, Under a Watchful Eye is number 8. At number 7, sorry, you can see the reflection of me in my phone on this nice shiny cover. We have The House of Small Shadows with this lovely creepy doll like artwork here. So this is about, I believe her name's Catherine. So this is about a lady named Catherine who goes to a private estate to work. I think it might be a relative's estate if I remember correctly, and the house is full of a certain type of art, shall we say, maybe some taxidermy, and it's renowned for this art. And you know, it's not normal. It's just not a normal place, you guys. The estate's not normal, the art isn't normal, and things start going a little weird for Catherine, and so her life is no longer normal. And I do remember a scene where she goes out into the town in search of some normality, and I don't think she finds it, if memory serves. So this was really, really creepy, and this is another one where I'm pretty sure I read this in one sitting because I was too scared to stop reading it, because I really just didn't want to be plagued by the stuff that's in here. And you know, the best way to get that kind of stuff out of your mind when you start feeling really spooked by it is to finish the book, finish the story, and hopefully it just won't lurk around, you know, especially when you have sleep paralysis and weird nightmares, which I have had nightmares from Nevill books, and that's probably why he's my favourite author, because so few people can actually scare me with horror. But this is a super, super creepy read, and I recommend it. Now we're getting into the ones that I love even more than the other ones, even though I love them all. So at number 6 is The Ritual, and I think most people have heard of this one at the very least, even if they're not up to speed with all of Adam Nevill's other works. This is the first Nevill book I read, and I bought it directly from Adam Nevill at a horror con that I attended, and he signed it for me with his usual creepy Latin. I'm not sure what that means. I did Google it at one point, but I can't remember. My brain is too full of what's actually in the books to remember Latin phrases. I think a lot of people know this one, especially because it was adapted into a Netflix film, which was really good. I really, really enjoyed it. As far as an adaptation goes from a beloved book as well, I always worry when I hear a film version of a book that was coming out. I will always go to see it, but I'm always pessimistic going in because usually they just don't do the book justice. However, there were changes made for the film, so if you're thinking, I can't be bothered to read the book because I've seen the film, you should read the book, because the halfway point is about where they changed things in the film from the book. I thought that the changes they made in the movie were smart changes for the sake of that we're watching a story on screen instead of reading it, and I really liked what they did with the film there. But I love the book as well. I love how things go in the book. I had a little giggle at there was a certain turning point that did make me laugh, but not in a eye-rolly kind of way. I just really enjoyed it because I wasn't expecting it. So it's a great story. Oh, and I haven't told you what the story's about. So 4 guys go into, I think the Swedish wilderness, the Swiss wilderness. They're in Switzerland or Sweden. One of those. Sorry, I can't remember. It's the S's, that's all that stayed. So yeah, but anyway, they go hiking in the woods, and this is a trip they've been planning for a while, and it's to honour a friend of theirs that passed away. That's very sad, and they used to all be very close when they were sort of university age, and this is the first time they've got together in a while. And it's great because the group dynamic you can see how it's changed. So you get information about what the group dynamic once was, but they've all grown and changed, matured in different ways, and now their tastes are different and all of that stuff. And so the relationships are different, and obviously with the stress of being in the woods and hiking, and of course they get lost. So yeah, it's very, very tense. And as well as that sort of wonderful group dynamic, which you can see is cracking, and you know, I felt very sympathetic about that. There's something in the woods with them as well, and it's really, really scary. I can proudly tell you that this novel, The Ritual, is the first full-length novel that I ever read in one sitting, and I've tried to make a habit of it since then, because I never knew that I had the reading speed to read a novel in one sitting, but basically what happened is I picked this up at about 9 p.m. one night, and then at around 1 I thought I really should go to sleep and maybe just one more chapter, and I just one more chaptered my way to the end of the book, and I think I may have finished it somewhere around 6 a.m. so and I was really messed up the next day because I had to get up, but you know, it was just so good. I mean, I couldn't put it down. I couldn't put it down even to go to sleep, and it kept me awake all night as well, which is another good thing because reading relaxes me and it normally makes me fall asleep and I'm already tired. So there was that. So yeah, whenever a new Adam Nevill book comes out now, I clear my schedule for the day and I set aside a whole day so that I can just read the book in one sitting if I feel like it. And I usually do. I do normally manage to get through a Nevill in one sitting because I just can't put them down. So yep, number 6 is The Ritual. It's a really great book and I highly recommend it. So at number 5 is a book that I found really, really hard to read in some ways, and it's No One Gets Out Alive. And I made a note when I was reading this that it both highly entertained me and made me feel really seen, and also sort of ruined my life. And let me explain. It's about a young lady called Stephanie who has to move into shared accommodation. Well, I say shared, she has her own bedroom and it's sort of like a block of flats or whatever, and she's just looking for a cheap room because she's broken up with her boyfriend. She's had to leave his home and she's signed up with an agency for work, but it's just not very consistent, and so she's living paycheck to paycheck. It's really, really tough times. She doesn't have a great family to fall back on, and she's got some sort of past family trauma as well. Her dad's gone, her stepmom was awful, or her mum was awful. I think it was her stepmom. In any case, so she's very isolated and alone, and she's very independent. But yeah, she really has no safety net, and flying through life without a safety net, I can't even imagine, because things are scary enough when you have people to fall back on. And then she gets to this apartment building, and the guy that owns it is just all sorts of wrong. You just wouldn't want to be around this guy, and he gets increasingly worse. And yeah, it's just a time. And then of course, things happen. There's stuff in this apartment building that isn't quite right. She's always hearing other female residents crying. She never knows what's going on. No one will talk to her, so she's deeply isolated in this place, even though there are people around her. And then, you know, there might be something supernatural that starts happening. So there are a couple of things in this book that Nevill does exceptionally well. So we've got his usual beautiful way with words, and his prose is glorious to read, his use of metaphor and how he describes things, the actual like tension, suspense and actual scenes of horror that he writes are wonderful if you're a horror fan and you're looking to be scared and feel tense and anxious. And I always feel anxious when I'm reading Neville's books, which is, you know, I don't normally like to feel anxious in real life, but when I'm reading a book, it's so good. It keeps me really like hooked into the story. So you've got all of his sort of usual Nevill trademarks of just great storytelling and writing, but then I think he really captured the experience of being a young woman in this book in a way that is really surprising from a male writer. Yeah. Oh, not that male writers can't write women. I've read so many great books written by men that have captured the essence of like a female character and written great female protagonists and everything. But Stephanie is possibly the most authentic female character I've read in a really long time. So the first thing that he did that made me very uncomfortable, but it was because it was so lifelike, is the experience of being... Don't want to go too much into real world stuff because that's exactly where I try to get away from when I read. But, you know, being a woman just that on its own can be quite scary when you live in a world full of people who are threatening to you. And I'm not saying all men are threatening, or, you know, the threat is always by men or anything like that. It's a very particular sort of implication that women feel from men sometimes. It's not even to do with the actual man that you're with. Sometimes it's just when you don't know someone very well and you're alone with them, and then the thought occurs to you, I couldn't escape if I wanted to, and then all of a sudden you feel like these layers of like this implication or something. And yeah, so, and the people that Stephanie is around in this book are definitely people that would make anyone nervous. Do you hear how uncomfortable I am even just thinking about these scenes? So there's just always this underlying implication, this underlying threat of just, if something were to happen, there's not a lot that Stephanie could do about it, and she's making every decision that she can to try and remove herself from the situation from the second that she feels like there is a threat. And it's very, very realistically depicted because she just doesn't have people who will help her. So this is one of those stories where, like, the protagonist is not making stupid decisions where you can sort of yell as you're reading or watching the TV and be like, why doesn't she just do this? She's doing everything that you'd think of to do, and she's just having doors slammed in her face. So I thought that was written really well because he wasn't really explicit or overt or just really obvious with it. It was just like he created this just sort of like background sort of like hum, or like that little kind of bass sound that's just in your head when you're watching a horror film and it just creeps in and you don't even know it's there, but it's there all the time with this. So, and that's not even to mention the actual supernatural threat and the main plot of the book either. So there was that, and I thought that it was just really excellently done and written with so much empathy. Yeah, I think that's what it was. It was just written with so much empathy. And the other thing, and I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable about this, I'm going to mention something personal because that's how I related so much to the book, and I want you to know before I say it that I'm absolutely fine, and it's just that, and the reason I prefaced what I'm about to say with that is because sometimes I just bring this up in casual conversation and then I realise I've made everyone uncomfortable. So I was involved in this car accident over a decade ago, and long story short, it was just bad misfortune really. Everyone else got away with sort of very minor injuries, and I was horribly injured, like as in like life-threatening injuries, and I spent a few weeks in hospital and went through this whole load of surgery and all sorts of stuff, and I'm fine now. But at the time it was, it was a very traumatic experience, and I had PTSD from it because, nobody expects to be in an accident, and I was like half asleep passenger as well, so it was a very shocking time. And the reason that I bring it up and why parts of this were so difficult for me to read is because, like, I didn't feel like I was triggered or anything like that. And it's been years since this all happened, and I count my blessings and I feel very lucky and fortunate. But I just felt like Stephanie read as someone who is going through PTSD, and there are parts of the book where she's definitely sort of still living in trauma that she's experienced. And the way that Nevill wrote that is definitely the most accurate depiction of trauma that I've seen, of PTSD. I hope he's never gone through anything that would like give him first-hand knowledge of it, and this is just coming from a place of he's very observant and talented writer with a lot of empathy, and he understands people. But yeah, there are things in this that were just like so like absolutely hit the nail on the head with that kind of experience. So one of the things that I really appreciated about it, and it made me feel like for the first time in years and years and years, like, oh my god, there are other people that actually understand this feeling, because it's quite hard to describe what like living with like trauma like that is like to people who never been through something traumatic. It's kind of a weird thing. So there are points in this where Stephanie's traumatized and everybody knows it, and for that reason well-meaning people like just don't believe stuff she says, and they sort of infantilizing, is that how you say that? They're treating her like she's a child. So they're kind of like making decisions for her and brushing off her concerns, and they think she's being paranoid. And these are all very like relatable things to me. And it's not because people are dicks or anything. It's like people that are in your life that love you, they're trying to look out for you. And when you go through something nuts, people tend to they remove your agency a little bit because they're trying to help you. So like they'll start taking your decisions off you, and it's really like that was one of the worst things for me, where people were trying to help, but it's not helpful when people are dismissing everything you say, because even if it is crazy, and not letting you make decisions about your own life. So yeah, that angle of this book, I really appreciated it because it was so relatable to me, and I'm sure that other people who have gone through similar things would also connect with this that way. yeah, so that's not to like sort of talk down anyone in my life that was helping me. People like my family and friends were absolutely amazing, but it's just, yeah, I think it's just a compulsion to like, it's almost like you want to parent people who've been through something. Do you know what I mean? You want to hug them and look after them, and it comes out in these ways that are quite frustrating to the person who's actually gone through the thing. So, but yeah, that was something that he captured amazingly well in this book, and I was really impressed, with it, because a lot of it was very subtle. But I picked up on it maybe because I'm a little bit more hypersensitive to that kind of stuff now, obviously for obvious reasons. But I really enjoyed it. So there were times where I had to like close the book, walk off, make a cup of tea, because I was like, oh, I don't think I can read any more of this today. It's a bit hard. And then I'd be like, no, I'm going back in. Actually, it's really good. So yeah, I have not like a love-hate relationship. It is a pure love relationship with this book. But of all of his books, this is the one where there were sections of it where I was a bit like, oh, my feelings. I absolutely recommend it though, of course, because it was such a great book. I think this is his longest novel. This is 600 and something. Yeah, 600 and something pages, but I flew through this one again. So that's kind of like a common theme. God, I talked myself into a dry throat. All right, at number 4, we have Apartment 16. So we kind of have like a dual narrative here. We've got April and Seth. Seth works in this apartment building, and April has inherited an apartment from a deceased relative, and she's there to sort of sort through her things and take care of the estate and all of that. And then Seth is there working night shifts, and there's some weird art in this apartment, and oh man, I just love the weird art thing, I guess, with Adam Nevill. Whenever Adam Nevill writes anything out of the ordinary into a book, even like I say out of the ordinary, like, you know, focus on a particular painting or something, you just know there's something up with whatever's going on. And this book, that I really love the format of it, because it was he's so good at ending a chapter with a hook. So you know, when you're reading and you're tired and you think, oh, I'll just get to the end of this chapter and then put the book down. I'll just get to a natural stopping place. But then you get to the end of the chapter and they say something that's like, oh, I have to just read one more chapter. But the thing about it is that we're alternating between characters. So we have an April chapter, a Seth chapter, April, Seth, and it does that all the way through. So you read like a hook at the end of an April chapter, and then you've got to read the Seth chapter to get to the next April one. But at the end of the Seth chapter, there's a hook. So then you've got to read the April one to get, you see how this becomes addictive. So yeah, this is amazing. This was really scary. This is the first Nevill book. I don't remember what order I read all of these in, apart from I remember the last ones I read and that The Ritual was the first one, but this is the first one that like really scared me. He's real good at writing in those scares, so I recommend. Kyle is a flawed protagonist. Wait a minute. Where's Banquet for the Damned? Oh, I've just realised there's a big mistake in my video. There are 11 Adam Nevill novels, not 10. And the reason that I missed one is because I lent it to my mum, so it wasn't physically on my shelf with all the rest of them, and I just completely forgot. So everything I've ranked so far, just move it down a number. Just move it down one, because at number 4, the real number 4, we have Banquet for the Damned. And once again, I was scared. This is about a guy who is obsessed with the work of this one great writer, and he gets a work opportunity with said writer. So him and a friend move to this university town to meet him, and the guy works in the university. He's getting on a little bit in age. Sorry, I have an age. He's getting on a little bit in age. And when they arrive there, our protagonist realizes that the attitudes of the people around this guy that he idolizes are not quite what he expected. And then there's another character investigating people who have been having these weird dreams, and they're sleepwalking, and they're very frightened, and it's a whole thing. I really enjoyed this book. It was, again, great scenes of horror, kind of ticked all of my boxes for things that I look for in a great story. So we have these like flawed protagonists, and we're dealing with like a a male friendship. I just really enjoy reading like friendships that have been going for years, and the kind of friendship that you have where it's like the person is almost family, and I really enjoy that. So they love each other despite, you know, each other's shortcomings and all of that kind of stuff. And then there's tension between them, obviously, because this work project isn't quite going to plan, and money's a thing, and da-da-da, all of that kind of stuff. And then when you actually get to the scenes of horror and you work out, or you're told what's going on, it was like really scary, and I'm really hoping that they turn it into a movie. So that would be great, even though I would be pessimistic as I always am, but hopefully it would come up something like The Ritual. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention that No One Gets Out Alive has a Netflix adaptation, but it does veer off the book like The Ritual does. I didn't like the movie as much as I liked The Ritual, the movie, but a lot of people really like it. So yeah, it was pretty good, pretty decent. At number 3, we have Last Days. And this is about a documentary filmmaker called Kyle who starts working on a project about a cult. And oh God, okay, so this might be the scariest Adam Nevill book. I'm pretty sure, because I remember there are several scenes in this that come into mind right now where I was reading this late at night, and that was a mistake, because it just, yeah, it gets really scary. The way that Nevill like describes things, especially when he's describing something that's like in your room and it shouldn't be there, and the way he describes like the sounds and everything and the way that things move, it's so distorted and uncomfortable, because it's like you can kind of imagine it, like things are just kind of off. Do you know what I mean? Like when Neville's writing these kinds of things, it's like things that should be normal, but there's something about them that isn't, and it's really unsettling, sort of like uncanny valley type of unsettling, and I really enjoyed it. But yeah, this ticked all my boxes. I absolutely love cults. I love even a hint that there's something evil lurking and at play and afoot, and I really loved the sort of format of this book as well. So I'm a big fan of found footage horror films, and if I was to try and recommend a book that reads like a found footage horror film is to watch, I would recommend this one. Very rarely that I get to read a book that feels like I'm in a found footage film when I'm reading it, so I really enjoyed it. It's obviously the documentary aspect, so a lot of the scenes you're reading through the lens of a camera, which is really interesting, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. But just great writing. But yeah, absolute like beast of a horror book. If you're looking for something that's actually going to scare you, if you're anything like me, then this is probably a great thing to pick up. Right, number 2 on my list, and it's really hard to pick between these two. So number 2 is Cunning Folk, and once again, look at this cover. I love it so much. So this is about a married couple called Tom and Fiona, and they have a young daughter as well. They move into a house that's kind of a DIY renovation project for Tom, and he's like doing the house up by himself. Fiona's kind of got the responsibility, like the financial burden is on her for the family, and their daughter's just none the wiser to everything. She just has a new house, and everything's okay, but it starts feeling like the house might be a bit of a money pit. And then to make things worse, the next door neighbours are just awful. They're just awful people. So yeah, these 2 sort of older people that live next door, and they don't like Tom. Tom doesn't like them, and it becomes sort of an ongoing neighbour dispute. And I'm smiling because it's kind of funny, and intentionally so, but also it's getting horrific. And yeah, there's something up with the people next door, shall we say, and there's not a whole lot that Tom can do about it. And he finds himself in that situation where things are escalating between him and the neighbours, but Fiona just wants a quiet life, and she's just not privy to a lot of this stuff. So when Tom's telling her, oh, they did this, she doesn't believe him because it sounds stupid. And so you're with Tom, and you're like, you don't know what you would do in this situation. I was reading this like, how would I handle this? Oh my God. So yeah, it was really fun to read, kind of funny in a dark way sometimes, and then it just goes to the best place for me. I won't tell you or spoil anything, but I just really loved it, and I really loved the ending of this one as well. It was great. Which means that number 1, of course, and maybe I've cheated a little bit putting it in this list, but I don't have it it won't fit in a different list for the reason that this is technically a novella, I would say. It's about 150-ish pages, and this is The Vessel. And again, look at the pretty cover. She's so scary. So this is my favourite, I think, because firstly, I really enjoyed the story. Secondly, because I always read things in one sitting if it's Adam Nevill, if I can help it, and this was much easier to read in one sitting than all of the other books on the list for the obvious reason that it's much shorter. And third, he took a risk with his writing style here, which I really appreciated, and that's one of my favourite things about Nevill, is that he could just settle into how he writes, like that works for him, and he could just continue to sell books like that. But he's always just changing things up, trying out new things, and I'll get more onto that when I got into his short stories. I cannot wait to talk to you about those. And he did it here, and I think it really worked. One of my favourite things to do when I finish a book that's like a 5-star read to me is I like to go to Goodreads and look at the 1-star reviews to see what people complain about. It's kind of a weird hobby, I know, but it's just fun for me. And I would say that it's quite split on half the people who read this are like me and they absolutely love the storytelling style, and the other half are like, I didn't like the storytelling style. And to those people I just say, I guess, to each their own, but I disagree, and I think it's great. So it said there are some author notes in here as well, and I always really love that about a Nevill book. And he talks about how he originally wrote it as a film script and then he converted it to a book, and for that reason there's no inner monologue stuff going on. So when you're usually in the head of a protagonist, you're reading their thoughts and everything, but this book is just written differently in that you have to infer everything from like the direct action and dialogue instead. So it's not written like a script, it's, you know, it's a book, but our main character, you're not like in her head. You have to work out what's in her head from how she's interacting with everyone around her, and that was so interesting to me. And I thought that he really nailed it. Like, she has an ex-husband, and I worked out what the issue with the husband was very quickly, even though it's really subtle. I loved it. It was so good. Like, reading the relationship dynamics and everything in that style of writing was just different. It was an absolute pleasure to read. If I were teaching a writing class, this is a book I would give to people as an example of how you break the rules of like narrative storytelling and do it really well. So what's it about? We have our protagonist who's called Jess, and she works as a care worker, like an at-home care worker for the elderly, and she gets assigned this house. This lady called Flo lives there alone, and because she's having sort of childcare issues because her shifts have changed, she suddenly has to do nights and all sorts of things. She has to take her daughter with her to work sometimes as well, and so there were times where I didn't like Jess very much, but I think that might be because of the lack of inner monologue, so we can only go by how she's actually acting with people, and we don't get that sort of extra little that we're in their head kind of angle. But I was always like flip-flopping, but however I felt about her, I was always very invested in what was happening, and I found her very relatable. Like, I understood the decisions she was making. She's kind of in a tough spot, and she has a lot going on. She's got this ex, she has a kid that she has to look after. I say has to. She has a child that she wants to take care of, but she doesn't really have anyone that can help her out that much. And then she gets these new shift patterns with her job, and that throws a wrench in with her childcare stuff. And then also the old woman that she's caring for is heinous. She's just the worst. And then on top of it, you know, it's an Adam Nevill book, so some scary stuff starts happening, and it's kind of a mystery. So a lot of like interweaving plot threads here. Nevill did a lot in a short page count, I will tell you. Like, this story is just so rich, so full, not a single wasted line. The writing is beautiful as always, and the scary scenes are really scary. So yeah, it's possible this is my second favorite book cover, but I'll show you my favorite one the next time I do an Adam Nevill video, because it's not one I've listed here. But I love these book covers, love these books, these Ritual Limited books. They're so good. That was nothing to do with the actual story, but I'm just saying. So yeah, so I guess that this, if I have to pick a number one, which I did for this list, it is The Vessel, but I love Cunning Folk, Banquet for the Damned, Last, like all, I was just gonna start listing every book I've already talked to you about. Really hard for me to rank Adam Nevill books, even harder than it was for me to rank all the Stephen King ones, even though there were like nearly 80 of those. But I just think the quality of his writing is so consistent, and for me there's just something about his storytelling and his actual stories that like really just ticks all the boxes for me for what I'm looking for as a reader. So this was a fun list for me to make. Sorry that this video is running a little bit long, but I really can't help it if I start talking about Adam Nevill. I've actually, by the time this video gets to the YouTube, I probably will have cut half of it as well, because I tend to waffle. So yes, there was one other thing that I forgot to mention, like midway through the video. I meant to tell you this. I just thought it might be really nice if you subscribed. If you have any requests for any videos you'd like to see from me, like bookish or films or anything horror related at all, let me know. I'd be happy to oblige. I really enjoy just talking about stuff I like. So yeah, this is fun for me, and I haven't thought of a sign off yet, so bleed.